Good morning, friends. Okay, let's continue with the discussion. In the previous session, we have started with process costing. What we learned is it is used in those industries where manufacturing is carried out through sequential processes, and the output of one process will become the input of the next process. In this accounting, what we try to find out is cost per unit at the end of every process. The purpose of identifying this is to do inventory valuation, calculating profits, deciding prices. All that can be done in case you have data on cost of every process. Like we do a cost sheet, instead of doing it in a cost sheet form, we do it in an account form. Debit side, all expenses will be returned. In the credit side, you will remove sale value of normal loss. That is basically what we used to do in costing. In the cost sheet, direct material, direct labor, add up everything, and less credit for recoveries are scrap. This is called net cost incurred by an organization. You divide by expected output, get the cost per good unit, multiply that with abnormal loss, abnormal gain, transfer to next process, closing stock, as well as cost of sales, in case you sell something and you are not a responsibility center, then you recognize the sales in the credit side and profit in the debit side. Profit is units into selling price minus the cost price. In case you are, sorry, this is in case you are a responsibility center. If you are not a responsibility center, only cost of sales will come. Only cost of sales will come in the P&L. Debit side to cost of sales, credit side by sales. The difference is the profit. Then we also learnt about initially an input output statement where we identify abnormal loss or a gain of a process. Opening stock, add input, total input less closing stock, process production less normal loss, expected output, actual output, abnormal loss or gain. This we do, and then we do a process account. Debit side particulars units amount, credit side particulars units amount. Debit side keep recording all expenses, to opening stock, to material, to labor, to expenses, all that you write. By normal loss, you write units and value. Then you reconcile the units by abnormal loss, by transfer to next process, by closing stock, by FG stock account to your abnormal gain. Units will tally. Then you calculate cost per good unit and multiply each of them with cost per good unit, and the process account will tally on its own. This is what we did in the previous session. We learnt about all of this, and we also learnt what is abnormal loss and abnormal gain is. Abnormal loss is the, if case my actual loss is more than what I anticipated, it's an abnormal loss. It's a scenario where actual output is lower than expected output. Actual output is lower than expected output, and vice versa is the other item, which is your abnormal gain. Broadly, this is what we did in the previous session. Net abnormal loss is equal to units into cost price minus realizable value. Net abnormal gain is units into cost price minus realizable value. And when you sell a normal loss or abnormal gain, entry is bank account debit, which is normal loss units plus abnormal loss units minus abnormal gain units into the realizable value. Abnormal gain account debit in case you have that, to normal loss account units, to abnormal loss account units. Either abnormal loss or abnormal gain will be there in the entry, or both will not be there in a single entry. Clear? Any doubts on this? Let's come to question 4. A manufacturing unit, just give me a manufacturing unit manufactures a product XYZ which passes through three distinct processes X, Y, and Z. Following data is given: material, wages, production overhead is recovered as 150% of this. OAR is not needed to be given. Basically, what is the total of direct wages here? What is the total of direct wages? 10,000. 15,750 by 10,500 into 100 is how much? Budgeted overheads by suitable base. 150%. They have mentioned the OAR, but it's not necessary. Some question. What we do is, we did in the previous question, we distributed that in the ratio of direct wages. So production overhead, X will be 150% of 4,000. Y will be 150% of 3,500. Z will be 150% of 3,000. Output is passed on to next process, and finally 12,000 units were transferred. I started with the input of 15,000 and output is 12,000. Input is 15,000, output is 12,000. Output is after three processes. No stock of material or work in progress. No opening stock, no closing stock. Percentage of wastage to normal input. This is called normal loss. This is your normal loss. X, they have given the percentage. Y, they have put a question mark. Y, they have put a question mark. And Z, they have given the percentage and the realizable value. Find out the percentage of wastage in process Y, given that output of Y is transferred to Z. Output of Y is transferred to Z at 4 per unit. Output of Y is transferred to Z at 4 per unit. Prepare process account for all the three processes. First, we will do process input output statement. Process 1 will be very simple. Process 2, you will get stuck. You will get stuck. What we do when we get stuck, we'll see. Open input output statement. Working note 1, input output statement. Input output statement. Particulars and three processes. The format driven area, particulars and three processes. Write the format first. Process X, process Y, process Z. Particulars and three processes. Opening stock, add input, total input, less closing stock, process production, normal loss, expected, actual, abnormal loss or gain. We will get stuck in process Y. We'll see what we can do. Can we start? Opening stock 0. Opening stock 0. Input of process X is 15,000 at rupees 2. 15,000 at rupees 2 were each introduced to process X. 15,000. Total input 15,000. Closing stock 0. Process to production 15,000. Normal loss much? 6%. 6% of input. You take it on any of them, doesn't matter. You will learn about stock in the equivalent units question. 14,100. Is the actual output given? No. Assumption, no abnormal loss, no abnormal gain. No abnormal loss, no abnormal gain. But process Y is going to be very tricky. Any doubts till this? Clear? Process Y 0. 14,100. 14,100. How much is the loss in process Y? What is the percentage of loss? Participate. I want participation, guys. What is the percentage? It is a question mark. It is a Question mark. So I'm stuck here. I cannot say no abnormal loss, abnormal gain and all, because they're asking what is the percentage of wastage. But what they have done is they have given. So what is this 4 is technically all expenses, all expenses minus normal loss into 2 rupees. Normal loss into 2 rupees. I don't know the normal loss units. I don't know the normal loss units divided by expected output. What is expected output is 14,100 minus normal loss. 14,100 minus normal loss. Somewhere this will help me in getting that normal loss. This will help me in getting that normal loss. I'll repeat again. What is cost per good unit formula is all expenses, which I will know for process Y. Second process, when I do process account, everything in debit side will come, minus normal loss into 2. I don't know the normal loss units. I don't know the normal loss units. I'll try to find out. I'll try to find out. Divided by expected output is process to production minus normal loss. Process to production minus normal loss. So we will leave it at this stage. Come to working note 2. We complete process X account, which is a formality, nothing there. Process Y account debit side we will do. We will write the formula. In the formula, normal loss will come. I go back to process Y and then close input output statement. Other things we do it later. What they have given is it is transferred at what rate? 4 per unit, which means cost per good unit is 4. Cost per good unit is 4. I don't know as of now how many units are transferred. I also don't know how many units are normal loss, but cost per good unit is equal to all expenses which will come from debit side minus normal loss. I have no idea, into 2 rupees, into 2 rupees divided by 14,100 minus normal loss. Normal loss will come out of this calculation. Normal loss we will get it in this calculation. Clear? Any doubts on this? Down now. Working note 2. Process X account. Process X account. Nothing much there in this. It's just a formality for us. Particulars units amount. Particulars units amount. Process X account. Particulars units amount. Particulars units amount. Look at the information and tell me what is the first expense in process X. There is one raw material which is 15,000 into 2, and then there is material consumed, which is a sundry material kind of a thing. That is not the main raw material. The main raw material is in the information. 15,000 units at 2 each were introduced to process X, to raw material. 15,000 into 2. Raw material 15,000 into 2. 15,000 into 2. Clear? Sundry material or to material, whatever name they have given, to material. When units are not there for an item, it is like a sundry material. What is sundry material? Is something which cannot increase the production. Example is chemicals in your chair manufacturing or leather manufacturing. These cannot increase the quantity of output. To material 2,600. Then what we have? To direct wages 4,000. To direct wages 4,000. To production overhead 150% of 4,000. 150% of 4,000. 6,000 by normal loss. How many units? 900 units. 900 into 1.1 by process Y. Unit should tally at this stage. Unit should tally at this stage. Any doubts on this? Clear? Now I'll do cost per good unit. Technically, it will not serve any purpose in this question. See, whenever there is no abnormal loss or an abnormal gain, cost per good unit technically doesn't serve any major purpose because I can directly take this as balancing figure and then go ahead. But still, as a procedure, we will keep doing cost per good unit. So below this, cost per good unit is equal to all expenses minus sale value of normal loss divided by expected output. Give me the total of expenses. 42 minus 990, 42 6, divide by how much? 14. What's the number? 5 and 1. If I do 2.9511, I get 41,611. I'll take balancing figure as 41,610. Then only it will tally, I think. 41,610. As I said, cost per good unit doesn't serve any major purpose when there is no abnormal loss or an abnormal gain. Any doubts on this? Clear? Can you proceed? Process Y account. Process Y account. To process X 14,100, 41,610. Process X 14,100, 41,610. Then what we have? 2 material consumed. How much? 1,000. 250. Direct wages 1,000. Production overhead 150% of 3,500. Clear? Any doubts on this? Done? Can you proceed? Now, credit side I have to write by normal loss. Unfortunately, I don't know the normal loss units. I don't know the normal. Can you tell me the total of this debit side? Right? 52, 610. Now listen. Write this in a minute. Cost per good unit is equal to 52,610 minus normal loss into 2. What is into 2 is basically the sale value of normal loss divided by 14,100 minus normal loss. 14,100 minus normal loss. So 4 is equal to 52,610 minus 2x, normal loss is x, okay, minus 2x divided by 14,100 minus x. 14,100 minus x. Please solve it, right? Cost per good unit is equal to all expenses, minus sale value of normal loss all expenses minus sale value of normal loss divided by expected output. X is 1893. That is normal loss. Okay, ठीक है, let others do it. Hmm, hmm. I'll come to it in some time. Matlab, you have touched on an alternate approach which will not work in this question. I'll come to it in some time. Let me complete this. Let me complete the next process and then I come to it. Your point is logical. I'll come to it in some time. As an alternate approach which is discussed, I'll discuss that live online guys. I'll discuss that in some time. First, you guys complete this. I'll then come back to the other approach which you're talking about. What's the answer you got for X? 18. Any doubts on 1895? Any doubts on 1895? Can we proceed? Come back here. Anybody has any doubts on 1895? By normal loss, 1895 and 1895 into 2. By losses Z, 14100 minus 1895 into 4. In case there is a rounding of difference, adjust it into 4. Can you proceed? Done? Okay. Now I go to input output statement. There also I'll explain the alternate approach which I had suggested, which will not work. Reason I'll explain there. Any doubts till this first? So come up 1895. Expected actual same. Expected and actual same. Expected and actual is same. 12205. Actual to 12205. No abnormal loss, no abnormal gain. Clear? Can we proceed? Everyone done? 0 L205. Some normal loss percentage is there in the question. How much? 5 percentage. 5 percentage. ठीक है. So 610, 7595. There is an actual output given for the third process. There's an actual output given for the third process. How much is that? 12,000. 12,000. How much? This is gain. 405 gain. Any doubts on this? Now listen. This problem, I could have done one more approach, which is not going to work in this question, but I could have attempted this approach. That is, I have 12,000 as the output, which means no abnormal loss, no abnormal gain is my assumption. So this will be 12,000, 100, 5, 95, 105 and 95. So 95 is equal to 12,000. What should be 100? 95 is equal to 12,000. What should be 100? 12,632. And this 12,632 can be taken as the output here in the other process, in the earlier process, and normal loss would have become a balancing figure in the second process. Normal loss would have become a balancing figure in the second process. I'm repeating again, 12,000. Why it is not working also I'll explain. Why it is not, this is not going to work in this question. There's a reason, I'll explain. 12,000, 95, 100. So 12,632 should be the input of the second process. That would have been output of the, so input of the third process, output of the second process, and balancing figure is normal loss. I would have exactly done this in case they had not given this 4 per unit. They had not given this 4 per unit. In case they had not mentioned cost per good unit is 4, this is the approach we would have followed. From Z, I would have got the Y's input, and logically no abnormal loss or abnormal gain in any of the three processes. No abnormal loss or abnormal gain in any of the three processes. If I do this, that 4 per unit will not work in the question. 4 per unit will not work in this problem if I do in the reverse manner. If I do it in the reverse manner. So if 4 per unit was missing, X you complete, Y leave it blank, Z you complete in the reverse order, take the Z's output input as X output, and then get the normal loss. Get the normal loss. Clear? Any doubts on this? Reason for it not working is because they have, that's why they have given that 4 per unit. They know that it is not working, that's why they have given 4. In case they did not mention X, they could have also mentioned for X also. For example, the question could say X has transferred at the rate of 2. From Z, I would have reverse worked and got Y. From Y, I would have reverse worked and got X. So I can keep doing in any manner I want to do. Only thing is they should not have given me cost per good unit for any of the processes. Then it would have become very simple. 15,000, I got the output of the first process. That is over. Last process, from output I get the input, and the second process losses balancing figure. Second process losses balancing figure. Any doubts on this? Any doubts on this part? Done with process Z. Anybody needs any extra explanation? Again, I'm repeating, in case 4 per unit was missing, then we would have done reverse working for last process, copied that number in the second process, and then close the account. Any doubts on this? Clear? Now, in exam situation, answer is not 1895. What is the requirement? Percentage of wastage in process Y. Many students in a hurry don't calculate that. So where you did your 1895, after that in the next line, percentage of wastage. After that 1895, percentage of wastage, 1895 into 100, two decimal answer, 13.4. They have asked for percentage, so I have to calculate the percentage, 13.44 percentage. Any doubts on this? Clear? Now it becomes like a normal problem for process it. I have done the input output statement. You have to do the debit side, get cost per good unit, value abnormal gain, and buy FG stock account. I'm giving you 4-5 minutes. 4-5 minutes to do process Z. Any doubts till process Y? Anybody has any doubts till process Y? Do process Z. 4 minutes for you. So I come to process Z account. Exactly similar to process Y till 205, 48, 820. Material consumed was 2000, 3000, 4500. To abnormal gain, how many units were there? 405. Value we don't know. By normal loss, 60, 610. What is the realizable value? rupee. Okay, 610 and 610 by FG control account 12,000. The units got tallied. Units have got tallied. Cost per good unit is equal to 58 320 minus 610 divided by 4 decimal 77 977 4 9772 2016. This side I get 9, sorry, okay, 6336. Yeah, 6336. Both the sides are tallying. Any doubts on this? No rounding off challenge coming. 4.9772. Any doubts on this? Clear? Can you proceed? Any doubts on this? Okay. Now I'll move to second segment of the chapter, which is on an area called equivalent units, are those problems where we will have work in progress. First question which I'm going to do will take maybe today's entire session itself, 1.5 hours it will end up taking. There are going to be 5 steps in it. We need to understand the 5 steps. There are totally 4 types of equivalent units question. One is called FIFO method, 1 material. Then FIFO method, 2 material. The weighted average cost, 1 material. Weighted average cost, 2 material. So totally 4 variants of questions are there. First you understand FIFO 1 material. P4 2 material is whatever I do in one material with small changes. Weighted average, whatever I do in P4 1 material with small changes. Weighted average 2 material, whatever I do in P4 1 material with small changes. So unless you understand P4 1 material properly, you will keep struggling with the other parts. So what is first, let's understand work in progress. A work in progress are those units which are not fully complete. They are in incomplete stage. So I have raw material, I have WIP, I have FG. Let's assume we incur 3 types of cost: material, labor, overheads. At the raw material stage, I have not incurred any of these costs. I have not incurred because it is still with me only. In the in the FG stage, 100% cost incurred, 100% cost incurred, 100% cost incurred. Moment if somebody says I've incurred 100% of material cost, 100% of labor cost, 99% of overhead cost, it is not a FG because some small work is still pending. Some small work is still pending. Moment you incur 100% of material cost, 100% of labor cost, 100% of overhead cost, it becomes a complete product. It becomes a complete product. So what can happen? Material could be 40% complete. Labor could be 20% complete. Overhead could be 10% complete. Till now, what we were doing is we were saying cost per good unit is 4 rupee, 3 rupee, 2 rupee, 1 rupee. One number you have to give. Now, what you need to do is cost per good unit is 4, but in that material is 2 rupee. Labor is 1 rupee. Overhead is 1 rupee. You have to bifurcate that 4 rupees into how much was the material cost per unit, how much is the labor cost per unit, how much is the overhead cost per unit. Why is this needed? Assume if 1,000 units are in process at the end of the year. 1,000 units are in process at the end of the year. The value of that is 1,000 into 2 rupees. Only 40% cost you have incurred. Only 40% cost you have incurred. Again, plus 1,000 into 1 rupee into 20% because we have incurred only 20% cost. We have incurred only 20% cost. Again, plus 1,000 into 10%. So what we do is we do not do this into 40 at per unit cost. We do into 40 at the units itself and call it as equivalent units. I had just touched upon this when we were doing overhead cost under our under absorption or over absorption. We said units produced including WIP equivalent units concept. So that equivalent units concept, what it says is if somebody says I have 1,000 units in process and they are 20% complete, they are 20% complete. 20% incomplete 1000 units is equal to 200 fully completed units, is equal to 200. How 200? 1000 into 20%, 1000 into 20%. What is degree of completion is how much work has been done. If 20% work has been done on 1000 units, which means 20% cost is incurred, you can indirectly say, instead of working on 1000 units, I worked on 1000 into 20%, 200 fully completed units, 200 fully completed units. So first thing we are going to do is, wherever there is work in progress, we are going to convert them into equivalent completed units, equivalent completed units, and then do the valuation, this is what broadly the approach is. You're going to convert your work in progress into equivalent completed units by adopting a degree of completion. If somebody tells me material 100% complete, labor 100% complete, overhead 100% complete, it is not a work in progress, it is not a work in progress. It becomes a finished product which either you transfer to the next process or transfer to FG stock account. All that is your wish, but it is not a work in progress. Clear? So how are we going to do this valuation is what you're going to understand. It goes through series of 5 steps. I'm not explaining the step, I explain with the problem so that you understand it better. I'll directly now go to question 5. Following details are related to work done in process A of XYZ company during the month of March 2007. Opening work in process. Opening work in process. Moment you see work in process, you have to do equivalent units. 5 steps need to be done. Opening work in process. Material is 100% complete. Material is 100% complete. 2000 units, value 1,40,000. Material 100% complete. Labor 75% complete. Overhead 75% complete. So 100, 75 and 75. If this was 100, 100, 100, it's not a work in process. It's not a work in progress. If this was 100, 199, it is still a work in process. It's still a work in progress. Material introduced in process A, 38,000 units. The cost for that is 14,80,000. Direct labor 359. Overheads 1077. Units scrapped. Units scrapped. What does unit scrapped mean? Unit scrapped means normal loss plus abnormal loss minus abnormal gain. Normal loss. Unit scrapped means actual loss. Unit scrapped is actual loss. Normal loss plus abnormal loss minus abnormal gain. Now they are saying there is a degree of completion for unit scrap. Listen, let's assume I am manufacturing something. When I manufacture, I'm doing a work. The defect can be known once everything is done. Once everything is done. Or in between itself, you know it is a bad product and you throw it away. In between itself, you know, and it is a bad. Why to incur extra cost? Why to incur extra cost? So here they are saying material 100% happened, but labor and overhead you spent only 80%. Labor and overhead you spent only 80%. 20% you did not spend because you knew it is no more of any use, so you threw it away at that stage. You threw it away means you sold it at a realizable value. You sold it at a realizable value. Units scrapped 3000 units. Degree of completion material 100%, labor and overhead 80%. Some question will say defect is identified in their finished state. Finished state means both are 100 100. Finished state means both are 100 100. If nothing is given, then it's 100 100. Defect will be identified only once the manufacturing is completed. So here I've identified defect after spending or after wasting 100% material cost, 80% labor cost, 80% overhead cost. Closing work in progress 2000, where material we have spent 100%, labor 80, overhead 80. I want you to delete this information from the question. This is right information only, but assuming if this was not given, what will happen is what I want to explain. Units transferred, assuming this data is not there. Assuming this data is not there. Normal loss, what is the wording there? 5% of, very critical, because here I have opening stock and closing stock. I want to know whether it is on input, total input or process production. Input, total input or process production. Realizable value of scrap, very limited information is very, most of the exam question they may change numbers and give. You are required to prepare all these are our steps: statement of equivalent production, statement of cost, statement of distribution of cost, just add a word of there, distribution of cost, process A account, normal loss account, abnormal loss account. I may not do the abnormal loss and normal loss account, but they have asked all of this. First, we are going to open a process account, write its debit side. See, the steps are 5 steps. In that 2 steps, you already know: input output statement and process account. First, I do process account, then I do input output statement, then I do the other steps. So, open process A account, particulars units amount, particulars units amount, process A account. Process A account. Process A account. As you write your debit side, first item is what? 2, opening WIP. Opening WIP 2000 units value. Clear? Next item. Material. Material. How many units? 38,000 units. 14 lakh. 80,000. Labor. Only the value. Labor 359. 2, overheads. Any other expense you see in the question? Any other expense? No. I'll come back to this in some time again. Open input output statement. Open an input output statement. Particulars and units. Do not have multiple processes now. Particulars and units. Last line item now will either be abnormal loss or gain, only one. You need not write slash and all. Last item will come in a minute. First write format: opening stock, add input, total input less closing stock, process production, normal loss, expected, actual. Opening stock, add input, total input. It's a very format driven area, time consuming, but the easiest of the lot. It is a time consuming area, that I will have to agree, but yes, it is very easy. Give me the opening stock. 2000. Opening stock 2000. Input, total input is 40,000. Closing stock is given in the question, 2000. Process to production 38. Normal loss is what the question says. 5% of or 40,000, 5% of total input. Expected 36. Expected is 36. Actual actual is 35, but I cannot use it because I told you to delete that. I told you to delete that information. So how do I get now actual output? We'll see. I have told you to delete that information. I told very clearly we don't have that information. Now, how do I get to that is unit scrap is normal loss 2000 plus abnormal loss 1000. Abnormal loss 1000. Otherwise, if normal loss was 4000, abnormal gain is 1000. Abnormal gain is 1000. Unit scrapped is how much? 3000. Unit scrapped is 3000. What is unit scrapped is normal loss plus abnormal loss, or normal loss minus abnormal gain. Normal loss plus abnormal loss, or normal loss minus abnormal gain. Normal loss 2000, unit scrap 3000, balance 1000 is abnormal loss. Balance 1000 is abnormal loss. In this question, it says unit scrapped. Unit scrapped is the actual loss of the company. Actual loss of the company is 3000 units. Actual loss of the company is 3000 units. In that, normal loss is 2000, balance 1000 is abnormal loss. So below the input output statement, units scrapped equal to 3000, split as normal loss 2000, abnormal loss 1000. Abnormal loss 1000. Abnormal loss 1000. Any doubts on this? Now it's very simple. I wanted 36,000 units. I wanted 36,000 units, but I have lost extra 1000 units. I have lost extra 1000 units, so I'm getting only 35. I'm getting only 35. The data of 35 should not have been there in the question, so that's why I removed it, so that in case in exam, if something like this comes, you can find out the number. 36,000 is expected output. I have an abnormal loss of 1000. I have an abnormal loss of 1000, which means I'm getting 1000 lesser. I'm getting 1000 lesser. So I get my actual output how much? 35,000. Any doubts on this? Yep. Can you proceed? Done till this. We go up. Right. By normal loss. By normal loss. 2000, some value is given in the question. Realizable value. Into 20. 2000 into 20. By normal loss 2000 into 20. By normal loss 2000 into 20. By abnormal loss value we don't know. By abnormal loss 1000, value we don't know. Clear? By process B, we have transferred to the next process. By process B, 35,000. 35,000 units we have produced. Actual output was 35,000. By process B, 35,000. And last item is what? By closing WIP. How many units of closing WIP? So count is almost over. The only problem is I don't know the value of these three. In order to get to this, may spend another half an hour to 40 minutes to get, because I have to initially explain fully. But otherwise, even in a normal, if you do it in an exam situation, also 15 minutes it will take to get to these three values. I don't know what is the value of abnormal loss, what is the value of process B transfer, and what is the value of closing WIP. What is the challenge for me? The challenge is process B 100% cost is incurred, so you multiply with 100% cost. Abnormal loss, you identified 100% material, 80% labor, something they have given. The unit scrap did not happen at the full end. And closing WIP is also not fully completed. Closing WIP is also not fully completed, because certain work in process is there, certain work in process is there. So now what I need to do is I have to calculate cost per unit, but it can't be material, labor, overheads all clubbed together and get one number. That approach will not work. That approach will not work. Working note 3. Any doubts till this? Below this, write one more item here in the second step, input output statement. Units started and completed after abnormal loss. Units started and completed. Started and completed. Listen, if you are following FIFO method or weighted average cost method, the formula used to be like this. FIFO method, value is equal to cost of production by units produced into the closing stock. And weighted average cost used to say cost of production. So under FIFO method, I want to know specifically which whatever we completed 35,000 units. Some of them we started and completed in the year. Some of them came from the previous year. That breakup is needed. That breakup is needed under the FIFO method, because I want to segregate cost of production separately and something which came from the last year separately. Something which came lot wise tracking. In FIFO we do lot wise tracking. Weighted average, club everything together. Club everything together. So listen, of the 35,000 units which I completed, 2000 came from the last year or last month. 2000 came from the last month. What is unit started and completed is actual output minus opening work in progress. Minus opening work in. Why this distinction is needed, you will understand as we proceed. So unit started and completed, you can write 33,000, and here somewhere you write transfer or actual output minus opening WIP. Actual output minus opening WIP. Actual output minus opening WIP. Clear? Unit started and completed is what you completed, deduct the opening work in progress. Deduct the opening work in progress. Done? Come down. Working note 3. Statement of equivalent units. 8 columns. Particulars, units, material, DOC equivalent units, degree of completion equivalent units, labor and overheads. I'll explain as we proceed, but you first write this. Material degree of completion equivalent units, labor degree of completion equivalent units, overheads degree of completion and equivalent units. Material, labor and overheads. Okay, now listen. Under the earlier method, formula was very simple. All cost divided by expected output. Now, the output which you calculate for material cost will be different. That is, the denominator for material cost will be different. Denominator for labor cost will be different. Denominator for overhead cost will be different. Why is it going to be different? Because material cost you could have incurred 100% for scrap, 100% for closing WIP. Whereas labor cost you incurred only 80% for scrap, 80% for closing WIP. So the denominator, the number of units itself is going to be different. First in the particulars, right? Further, right? Whatever I say, I'll keep explaining that. Further work on opening work in process, units started and completed, normal loss, abnormal loss, closing WIP, and total. Further work on opening WIP, unit started and completed, normal loss, abnormal loss, closing work in progress. These 5 line items will keep coming in this step. Abnormal loss can be substituted with abnormal gain. Abnormal loss can get substituted with abnormal gain, but these 5 line items will come. These 5 line items will come in this working note. Tell me how many units of opening WIP from the earlier working note? 2000, right? 2000. Units started and completed how many? 30. Normal loss how many? Abnormal loss. Closing work in progress. Total. This number has to match total input of the earlier working note. It has to match total input of the earlier working note. Total input of the earlier working note. What indirectly has happened is I had a total input of 40,000. What did I do with that 40,000? In that 2,000 was opening WIP, 33,000 was started and completed, 2,000 is normal loss, 1,000 is abnormal loss, closing WIP is 2,000. In case we were doing the earlier methodology, that is the earlier method, we were just dividing by 1 units. Now listen for some time. I'll give you time to write. Please listen. What I am trying to find is how much work is done on each of this. How much work is done on each of this in the current year. Normal loss for work done is always 0%. Normal loss we always take 0%. I'll explain the logic in some time. Normal loss, the work done is always taken as 0%. Why it is taken as 0% is in the total of the units. In the total of the units, see, you will get a number here. It could be, assume 20,000, 10,000, some random number I have put. Okay, in this this will be the denominator. This will be the denominator. So rule very clearly says in the number of units denominator, normal loss should not come. Normal loss should not come because our formula used to be what? Expected output. What is expected output is processed production minus the normal loss. So I have to remove the normal loss. How do I remove? By writing 0%. By writing 0%. Wait for some time. I don't want you to write anything. So this rule is 0 and all the units will also become 0. All the units will also become 0. And now, as of now, denominator for all the 3 is 0, 0, 0. I'll keep adding everything in some time. Being listen mode. Units started and completed. Units started and completed means full work we have done it in the current year. Full work started and completed, which will have a degree of completion of 100%. Degree of completion of 100%. And what will happen? Equivalent units is 33,000 into 100%, 33,000 into 100%, 33,000 into 100%. So this is now 33,000, 33,000, 33,000. Now my denominator for calculating cost per unit is 33, 33, 33. Cost per unit denominator is what? 33, 33 and 33. Abnormal loss, question somewhere has said we have not incurred full cost. We have not incurred full cost. What have we incurred on abnormal loss? What does the question say? Question is saying some cost we have incurred on abnormal loss. 100% for material and 80% for labor and overheads. 100% for material and 80% for labor and overhead. So concept says you write 100%, 80% and 80%. I don't want you to write this. I have to explain one, explain second time, third time, then only you'll have to write. So please be in lesson mode. It involves little bit of extra calculation. What is equivalent units? 1000 into 100%, 1000 into 80%, 1000 into, now my denominator for cost per unit will be 34, 33,800, 33,800. I am yet to complete it. I am yet to complete it. So this is given percentage. This is given percentage. Closing WIP also given percentage. What is given percentage? How much work has been done? How much work has been done? What is the degree of completion given in the question? 100, 80, 80. So 2000 into 100%, 2000 into 80%, 2000 into 80%. Now my denominator will be 36, 35, 400, 35, 400. I am yet to even complete and I am yet to fully complete it. So this is also given. Further work on opening WIP. What is further work is whatever I do it in the current year. Whatever I do it in the current year. So the rule here is 100 minus given percentage. Why minus given? Given is what you completed in the last year. Given is what you completed in the last year. 100 minus given is what you complete in the current year. For example, if this goes to the next year, you'll do 100 minus 100, 100 minus 80, 100 minus 80. Because 100% work done here, next year 0%. 80% work done here, next year 20%. 80% work done here, next year 20. So this rule is 100 minus, look at the opening WIP, some degree of completion they would have given. 100 minus 100 is 0%. 100 minus 75 is 25, and 100 minus 75 is 25. 25. And again I do the multiplication. 2000 into 0%, 25%, and 2000 into 25%. Now my denominator will be 36, 35, 900, 35, 900. This is the correct denominator. The correct denominator to be used is what? 36,000, 35, 900, 35, 900 to calculate what? Cost per unit. To calculate the cost per unit. How will I calculate cost per unit? Material cost divided by 36,000, labor cost divided by 35, 900, overhead cost divided by 35, 900, divided by 35, 900. Wait, I'll repeat again. Rule is, first I start with normal loss. First I start with normal loss. Rule is very simple. Normal loss should not form in denominator. So I write 0%, 0 units, 0%, 0 units, 0%, 0 units. Rule is 0. Now, you may ask, why should I write it here? If I don't write it here, then I may not be able to check whether I'm getting the total input. Somebody says I'm not writing it here. Technically, it doesn't make any difference. Even if you don't write it also, it's okay. Even if you don't write normal loss here also, it is okay. Only thing is you cannot check that. You cannot check whether it is matching the total input or not. So 0%, 0, 0. Now, abnormal loss is rule is given percentage. Why given percentage? Because it is not mandatory. I have to spend all cost. I have to spend all cost. I could have spent little lesser. I could have spent little lesser. So in this case, we have spent 100% on material, 80% on labor. So 100,000 into 80%, and 80% on overhead, which is again 1000 into 80%. Any doubts on this? Closing WIP given percentage. Given means what is the work done in the current year. Given is what is the work done in the current year. How much work is done for closing WIP? 100, 80, 80. And if closing is given, opening is 100 minus given. Opening is 100 minus 100 minus, not this. For opening WIP, they have given a separate percentages. So 100 minus given. 100 minus given. What is the 100 minus given for material? 0. So 100 minus 100 is 0. Labor 100 minus 25. Over it's 100 minus 75, 25. Unit started and completed is 100%. Reason is very simple. You started and completed. You started and completed. So this is 100% equivalent units. 100% equivalent units. 100% equivalent units. Denominator is 36,000, 35,900, 35,900. Denominator is 36, 35,900, and 35,900. I'll repeat last time. We have totally 6 items. 5 items I've written here. Last item is abnormal gain. Only thing is, if it's abnormal gain, units will be negative. Units will be negative, and degree of completion will be 100%, because an abnormal gain is one which turned out to be a good unit. It turned out to be a good unit, which means it is fully completed. It is fully completed, but I wanted a bad unit. I wanted a bad unit. Abnormal gain is turned out to be a good unit. You wanted a bad unit. Abnormal loss turned out to be a bad unit, but you wanted a good unit. You wanted a good, but it has turned out to be bad. I cannot help it. It is, I'm able to see a bad unit, which is 100% material, 80% labor, 80% overhead. So rule is very simple. Further work on opening WIP 100 minus given normal loss. Further work on opening WIP. What is the rule? 100 minus given percent. Normal loss 0%. Abnormal loss. Abnormal loss given percentage. Closing work in progress given percentage. Unit started and completed 100%. 100%. Abnormal gain 100%, but units in negative. Units in negative. Normal loss 0%. Abnormal gain 100% with units being negative. Abnormal loss given percentage. Closing work in progress given percentage. Opening work in progress 100 minus given percentage. Unit started and completed 100%. Clear? Any doubts on this? Now write this working note. Statement of equivalent units. As per the question, this is statement of equivalent production. Sorry, we'll use the name given in the question. Otherwise, we normally call statement of equivalent units. First requirement of the question, statement of equivalent production. This is that step, statement of equivalent production. When I ask you to write, I don't expect you to look at the screen. You can keep writing on your own. You have understood everything. Write on your own. Refer screen if you get a doubt. Because the second, third question onwards, I will not go at this pace. So unless you understand this properly, it will become very tough. So that is the reason I said this will take at least 1 hour for me. Clear? Can you proceed? Working note 4, statement of cost. Technically, statement of cost per unit. Done with this? Everyone done? Statement of cost. Particulars, material, labor, overheads. Particulars, material, labor, overheads. Material, labor, overheads. Current period cost. Current period cost. Current period cost. Look at the process account debit side and tell me the cost. Material cost is how much in your process account? 14 lakh. Labor cost, overhead cost. What earlier we were doing is we were clubbing all the three together. Now separately material, separately labor, separately overhead. Less sale value of normal loss. It will be there in the credit side. In the process account credit side, you'll have normal loss sale value. How much? 40,000. Listen. Earlier we used to club them together and subtract it. Now material is separate, labor is separate, overhead is separate. So I have to segregate this into the three or do something. Listen, rule is whenever you scrap something, for example, old newspaper, the value of the old newspaper is just for the weight and not for what is the content in it. So mostly if anything is scrapped, you get value only for the material. You do not get any value for the labor or the overheads. So sale value of normal loss will be subtracted only from the material column, only from the material column, because nobody pays for the, you will not say that this newspaper covers good news items, bad news item, good articles. All that does not matter. What matters is he will put a weight and give you the value for it. So whenever we scrap something, if I scrap this table, he will just look at what is the material in it and give me the value for that. He is not going to say that the person who created made lot of efforts, he spent so many things, all that no value, nothing you're going to get. Whenever we scrap something, there is only value for the material content in it. So less sale value of normal loss only from the material column, only from the material column. Net cost incurred. Net cost incurred, equivalent units, cost per equivalent unit. Equivalent units, cost per equivalent unit. Equivalent units, we got it in the earlier working note, 36,000, 35,900 and 35,900, and divide now. 40, 10 and 30. Cost per equivalent unit is 40 rupees, 10 rupees and 30 rupees. Cost per equivalent unit 40, 10 and 30. Earlier same thing we were doing, but this 40, 10 and 30 was clubbed together and you got a single number. You got a single number. Now what we will do is, if I want to know what is value of closing work in progress, it's very simple. 2000 into 40 rupees plus 1600 into 10 rupees plus 1600 into 30 rupees into 40 into 10 into 30. If somebody wants to, we wanted three items to be valued. In that process, you are left it in the credit side. Abnormal loss, you don't know the value. Closing WIP, you don't know the value. And transfer to next process, you don't know the value. So what is value of abnormal loss? 1000 into 40, 800 into 10, 800 into 30, 2000 into 40, 1600 into 10, 1600 into 30. And your other items we are going to value. Transfer to next process is not directly coming, it is going to come in some way. So in the next step, what we will do is, I will write this item, further work on opening WIP. What is the value of further work on opening WIP? 0 into 40 plus 500 into 10 plus 500 into 30. Units started and completed, 33,000 into 40, 33,000 into 10, 33,000 into 30. Normal loss, we already know the value, so we're not going to write it again. Abnormal loss, 1000 into 40, 1000 into, sorry, 800 into 10, 800 into 30. Instead of adjusting the cost per unit, we adjust the number of units. We adjust the number of units. Last step, statement of valuation. In this question, it's called distribution of cost. We normally call it as valuation, but the question uses the name distribution of cost, right? Step 5, working note 5, statement of valuation slash distribution of cost. Valuation slash distribution of cost. Listen for a minute. It's time consuming exercise only. Listen, I'm going to copy paste, like we were doing CDR into CDQ. Like we were doing CDR into CDQ. I've copy pasted this 5 items which were there. We have copy pasted the 5 items which are there. Now heading is material, labor, overheads. Material, labor and overheads. You will take the units from the step 3 into 40. Take whatever number is there in the calculator. What you can do, 40 in the calculator, do 40 into, it's like this, 0, 33,000, 0, 1000, 2000. Clear? 40 into 0, 33,000, 0 you need not do, into 33,000. So into 0 equal to 33,000 equal to 0 equal to 1000 equal to 2000 equal to. Wait for some time. Wait for some time. This is what I'm going to do. In that, normal loss will not come because it's already valued. Normal loss will not come. So you first tell me, further work on opening WIP. What is the units in the material column? 0 into 40. Then units started and completed into 40. Abnormal loss. Look at your step and tell me how many units? 1000 into 40. Closing WIP. 2000 into 40. Labor column. Further work on opening WIP. How many units? 500 into 40. Units started and completed. Sorry, 500 into 10, 10, 10. 500 into 10. 33,000 into 10. Abnormal loss. 800 into 10. Closing WIP. 1600 into 10. Overheads. 30. 33,000 into 30. 800 into 30. I'll put a total. I'll give you time. Listen for some time. There will be a row wise total and a column wise total. So another total is this side. Now, this total will match net cost incurred. This total will match net cost incurred of the earlier working note. See, what we are doing is net cost incurred is 14 lakh 40. I'm distributing that 14 lakh 40 to opening WIP 0, started and completed 1320, abnormal loss 40,000, closing WIP 80,000. Material 359. I'm distributing it as 5,000 to opening WIP, 332 units started and completed, 8,000 to abnormal loss, 16,000 to closing work in progress. Over its same way we are splitting. Now these two can write it in the credit side of the process account. Transfer to next process can become balancing figure. Or there is a formula I'll calculate. But now you have to do this step. This step is very simple. You are not required to do anything in this step. You have to take CDR and multiply with CDQ. CDR and CDQ. CDR is step 4, cost per equivalent unit, and CDQ is in the earlier working note. CDQ is in the earlier working note. Clear? Any doubts in this? Start writing this. Take units from the earlier working note, multiply with the cost per equivalent unit of the next working note. It is, this step is just a formality, but yeah, it's a time consuming area. That is one thing which I'm very sure, but it's just a formality. In the calculator, you should do ideally like this: type 40 into whatever number you want to do, equal to, then 10 into number equal to. Clear? Any doubts on this? This is in page 77. I am going to pause, wait for some 3 4 minutes. I want you to go through the steps again. Be clear. I'm yet to complete the problem, but I'm waiting for 3 4 minutes. Please go through this properly. 3 4 minutes time for you. Page 77 of the concept material. Okay. Any doubts in any of those 5 steps? Step one is process account. Step two is input output statement. One extra item I calculate called as unit started and completed, which is what you complete minus the opening WIP, Then I calculate statement of equivalent units, particulars, units, material, two subcolumn, labor, two subcolumn, overheads, two subcolumn. Some question, labor and overhead would be clubbed and given as conversion cost. So particulars, material, two subcolumn. Basically the concept says you have to do this for every item of cost seen in the debit side of process account. We saw three costs: material, labor, overhead. Some rare question you may find: material, labor, overhead 1, overhead 2. Then there will be 4 columns. So that is 4 into 2 subcolumns each. So it will keep increasing if you have more items. Here we had only 3 items. So particulars, units, material, 2 subcolumn, labor, 2 subcolumn. This is the rule. Further work on opening WIP: 100 minus given, unit started and completed 100, normal loss 0, abnormal loss given, abnormal gain 100%, but you see the units is in brackets. Units are in brackets, and closing WIP given percentage, and the total should match total input as per the input output statement. Then I have to calculate cost per unit. In this I deduct sale value of normal loss only from the material column, take units from step 3, take cost per unit from step 4, and do multiplication, which is statement of valuation or distribution of cost. And here also the column wise total will match what? Cost incurred as per working note, net cost incurred as per working note 4. It can also match cost incurred. How can it match cost incurred? Is if I add an item called normal loss, write 40,000 only for material, 40,000 only for material. In case I add that, it will match cost incurred. In case I'm not adding that, it will match net cost incurred. It will match net cost incurred. So I have not added it here, doesn't really matter. Any doubts till this? Now at the end of it, right, transfer to next process is equal to opening WIP plus further work on opening WIP plus units started and completed. Opening work in progress, further work on opening work in progress, units started and completed. This is the opening WIP given in the question. Further work on opening WIP which we have calculated. Units started and completed. Value 26 lakh, 26 lakh 40,000, 26 lakh 40,000. Overall total is how much? Now I'll give the logic of the formula also. Logic is very simple. Transfer to next process minus opening work in processes, unit started and completed. This goes to the other side. So opening work in progress plus unit started and completed is transfer. Opening work in progress has two values. One which we did it in the previous year, which is given in the question, and the extra work which we have done the valuation. The extra work which we have done the valuation. Any doubts on this? Any doubts on this? Go to the process account, complete the credit side. Complete the credit side. Values are already there. Values are there. You just need, sorry, units are there. Values you have to copy paste now. Any doubts in this? Tell me how much is the abnormal loss? 72,000. Transfer to next process. 28 lakh. It will tally. In case if there was rounding off we had done, then there can be a difference which I have to adjust. Clear? In order to get to these three numbers, there was a lot of computation to be done. Can't help it. It is a lengthier calculation always, because I need to get to these three items. Any doubts on this? Any doubts on this part? Clear? Question has also asked for abnormal loss and abnormal loss account and normal loss account. I am not doing it. Normal loss, you will open, it will say to process account by bank account. Abnormal loss to process account by bank account. 1000 units will be sold for 20 rupees. 1000 units will be sold for 20 rupees. And whereas your value of abnormal loss we have recognized is 72. 72,000 is the value. You will sell it for 1000 into 20. 20,000 you will sell. 52,000 is your net loss. 52,000 is your net loss, which will go to costing P and L. Let's come to question 6. A company produces a product. I'll do a small part of it today, and the next session we continue, which passes through two processes. During the month of April 2006, materials of 40,000 components were put into process 1, of which 30,000 were completed and transferred to process 2. Those not transferred were 100% complete as to material and 50% complete as to labor and overhead cost. So technically, degree of completion for closing WIP is 100 for material, 50% for labor, 50% for overheads. Process 1 cost: direct material 15,000, direct wages 18,000, factory overheads 12,000. In the first process, I don't see any normal loss, abnormal loss, all that doesn't seem to be there. Then of those transferred to process 2, 28,000 units were completed and transferred to finished goods. There was a normal loss in process 2. 1800 remain unfinished. Unfinished is closing work in progress, on which what 100% is complete for material, 25% is complete for wages and overheads. No further material cost is incurred after first process until the end of the second process, when what packing is applied to the completed components. Process and packing cost were as follows: prepare statement of equivalent production cost per unit and process 1. Same thing, equivalent production cost per unit and process 2. First, I will do process 1 5 steps. It will not have more many of the items which we saw in the previous question. Then we will do the process 2. So today, if possible, we'll complete the process 1 part, and then I do the process 2 part in the next session. Same 5 steps. First, open process 1 account. Open process 1 account. Process 1 account. Process 1 account. Particulars units amount. Particulars units amount. Tell me what are the expenses in process one, two. First expense, what do you see? Is there a opening work in progress? Is there any opening work in progress? No. Direct material. Direct material, 15,000. Units will be there, no? Give me the units, somewhere units will be there. 40,000 and 15,000 amount. 40,000 units and 15,000 amount. Listen, if they had given a separate value for this 40,000, write that, and then to sundry material 15,000. To sundry material 15,000. They have not given a value for this 40,000. Means this 40,000 is that 15,000 rupees. The next expense. Direct wages, how much? 18,000. Then factory overheads. Any other expense do you see? Is there any other expense you see for process one? Do input output statement now. Do input output statement, particulars units. I can do this statement alone if I want. I can club it, but I'm not clubbing as of now. We could have clubbed process one and process two here. Or you write it like this: particulars process one and process two. Process two we will see later. Process two we will see it later. Just close process one. This is a simple question. Only thing is it has two processes, so man can become little tricky. Particulars process one, process two. Opening stock 0. Input, total input is 40. Read question carefully. There is some closing work in progress. It says 40,000 units were put in, 30,000 were completed, 10,000 will be work in progress. No normal loss, no abnormal loss, no abnormal gain, nothing is there in the question. So process one is a very simple question. Only two items are there. One is your production, second is closing work in progress. Closing work in progress. So 10,000 is, it says 40,000 units were introduced, 30,000 are completed, and those which are not completed, degree of completion they have mentioned. So minus 10,000. No normal loss expected, no abnormal loss, no normal loss, no abnormal loss, no normal loss, no abnormal loss. Units started and completed is 30,000 minus 0. 30,000 minus 0. So previous question had 5 items. This question, no normal loss, no abnormal loss, no further work on opening WAP. Only 2 items will be there. Only 2 items are going to be there. I do not have normal loss in the process. First process, second process has, we'll see second process later. Abnormal loss is not there. Opening WIP is also not there. So this is the format. You take your time and please close this. Only 2 items. Only 2 items. Particulars, units, material, labor, overheads. Numbers will change obviously. These are previous question. You do it and then complete. Statement of equivalent production. Particulars units, material, labor, overheads, DOC, and equivalent units. You keep filling it. Refer screen in case you want it. Only two items are there. Rule you know, follow the rule, and complete statement of equivalent production. Statement of equivalent production. Units started and completed 100% DOC. Closing WIP 100% for material, 50% for labor, 50% for overheads. Format driven area, as long as you're able to properly write numbers, you will get to the correct answer. Any doubts in this? Any doubts on statement of equivalent production? I get 40,000 for material, 35,000 for labor, 35,000 for overheads. Working note for statement of cost per unit, same format. Your numbers alone will change. Again, I am not doing it, you do it. Material, labor, overheads, sale value of normal loss is not there, zero. As a format, you can write it, but sale value of normal loss is not there. Current period cost less SV of normal loss, net cost incurred, equivalent units, cost per equivalent unit. Current period cost less sale value of normal loss, net cost incurred, equivalent units, cost per equivalent unit. Debit side, when you wrote process account, you have the numbers there. Current period SV of normal loss, net cost incurred, equivalent units, cost per equivalent unit. Keep it as four decimals when you do the calculation. 0.3750, 0.5143, 0.3429. Any doubts on this? Now you need to value only two items because there are only two items here. No normal loss, no abnormal loss, no closing WIP. All that is not there. Sorry, closing WIP is there. Opening WIP is not there. Opening WIP is not there. Any doubts on statement of cost? I could have left this entirely at your end, but it becomes a little difficult because first question. So that's why I'm guiding step by step. Any doubts on statement of cost? 0.3750, 0.5143, 0.3429. Then do statement of valuation or distribution of cost. Need to value two items. Unit started and completed, closing work in progress. Unit started and completed and closing work in progress. Small rounding of difference can come in this question. ₹3 difference I'm getting here. It's rounding of differences. It is like your ABC method where you will have to keep doing longer calculations. It's a calculation heavy area, that I'm sure, but a simpler one. Clear? Any doubts on this? Record this on the credit side. Unit started and completed is equal to transfer to next process because there is no opening WIP. I cannot add anything extra here. So instead of taking 36,966, take it as balancing figure. 2-3 rupees difference is there. I think ₹3 difference will be there. ₹3 difference is going to come. Any doubts on this? Any doubts till this? Can I proceed in the credit side by process to value? I'll not write. I'll write it as balancing figure and by closing WIP 10,000 units. What is the value? Some 8,000, 8,000, 7 and balancing figure is 963. In calculation I got 36 966. 36 963. In computation we got 36 966. Any doubts on this? Again I'm repeating, process costing calculation heavy area. I maximum amount of time in the chapter which I've done till now is going to be spent only on process costing. So this is because it takes more time to do calculation. Process 2 I'll take it in the next session. Any doubts on this? Any doubts on whatever we have done till now? Please revise this and then we continue in the next session.